The first prayer call, the Fajr, had coiled through the pre-dawn gloom of Tehran an hour ago. A mournful, electronic echo that served as Leah's only alarm clock. Its final, warbling note had faded into the hum of a city not yet fully awake, leaving behind a silence that was more unnerving than the sound itself. Now, the digital countdown on the traffic light at the sprawling intersection of Hamid Expressway and Kargar Street bled from red 7 to red 6. Each numeral change was a slow, concussive blow against the anvil of her ribs, a physical manifestation of time contracting toward a single, irreversible point. The cold was a living thing, a damp, penetrating chill unique to the high-altitude basin of the city. A malevolent presence that whispered down from the snow-dusted Alborz Mountains. It found its way through every seal and seam of the battered Peugeot 206, a vehicle so anonymous and ubiquitous it was practically invisible. The car's heater fought a losing battle, managing only to puff out a weak stream of lukewarm, dusty air that smelled of burnt plastic and years of neglect. The cold seeped through the thin rubber soles of her worn boots, up through the pedals, traveled through the cracked plastic of the steering wheel, and settled deep into the marrow of her bones. Her hands, resting lightly on the wheel, were gloved in thin black leather, but remained perfectly steady. A testament to a discipline forged in crucibles of fire and fear she no longer allowed herself to remember. The memories were locked in a steel box in the back of her mind, and the key had been thrown away long ago. To the world, or at least to the bleary-eyed drivers in the adjacent lanes, she was just another woman caught in the morning snarl. Her chador, the traditional black cloak, was adjusted just so. Its fabric a heavy, reassuring weight on her shoulders, a practical and perfect disguise that erased her form, her face, her very identity. Her gaze, deliberately unfocused, was lost in the hazy middle distance, where the majestic, snow-capped peaks of the mountains should have been, but were instead erased by the city's thick, yellow-gray shroud of smog. The air inside the car was a stale testament to its history. Old plastic, the faint, lingering scent of her own adrenaline-laced anxiety, and a ghost of cheap perfume from a previous owner. Outside, it was a toxic cocktail of diesel fumes, the acrid, biting tang of cheap Bahman cigarettes from the unshaven driver in the next car, and the impossibly sweet, wholesome scent of baking Barbary bread from a nearby nanvai. The smell was so incongruous with their purpose, so tied to life and sustenance. It felt like a cruel, cosmic joke. Inside her head, a symphony of controlled chaos was being meticulously conducted. Her heart, a traitor in her chest, hammered a frantic, syncopated rhythm, lub-dub, lub-dub-dub, against the silent, unforgiving metronome of the traffic light. 6, 5. Saber 1 to Archangel. Her voice was a ghost in her own ears, a whisper of thought given form. It was transmitted not by her lips, which remained still and slightly parted, but by a flesh-colored subvocal microphone, a tiny transducer no larger than a lentil, taped with medical adhesive to her larynx beneath the modest scarf. It picked up the vibrations of her vocal cords before they could become sound, turning silent speech into encrypted data packets that leaped from a micro-antenna woven into the very fabric of her headscarf. Visual on the package. Approaching the intersection, southbound lane. Confirmed, gray Mercedes E350, late model. He's 2 cars behind the blue Saipatiba. The reply came not as a sound, but as a pressure change deep within her inner ear. A vibration conducted through the mastoid bone by the tiny receiver tucked discreetly behind it. It was a strange, intimate sensation, a voice inside her skull that was not her own. Aitan's voice, filtered through $1 billion of satellite relays, bounced from a dish in the Negev desert to a bird in geosynchronous orbit and back down to her in less than a second. It was as dry and ancient as desert sand. The encryption was AES 256, a formidable digital lock. But the frequency was the true marvel. A spread spectrum signal hopping across the 420 to 450 megahertz UHF band 1,000 times a second. A digital ghost impossible for the listening posts of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps to pinpoint or decode. For all the technology, his voice still carried the weary weight of a man who managed death on a global scale from a sterile, windowless room 3 floors beneath the streets of Tel Aviv. Archangel confirms. All assets are green. The board is set, Leah. Play the game. The game. For 6 brutal, nerve-shredding weeks, the game had been their entire universe. A universe that had shrunk from continents and oceans to this single, grimy intersection in the sprawling, smog-choked heart of the Islamic Republic of Iran. The target, the package, was Dr. Arash Kaviani. To the world, he was a celebrated physicist, a national hero whose portrait hung in the halls of Sharif University of Technology, a man lauded for his contributions to Iran's peaceful nuclear energy program. To the intelligence analysts at the Kirya, Mossad's headquarters, he was the architect of Armageddon, the solitary genius who had solved the final, elegant, terrifying equations of warhead miniaturization. He was the brain that was building a bomb to erase their home, her home, from the map. And in 4 seconds, if the game was played correctly, that brilliant, malevolent brain would cease to function. 4. Her eyes, cold and analytical, flicked to the rearview mirror, its glass vibrating slightly with the Peugeot's rough idle. 3 cars back, a dusty white Zamyad pickup truck, the ubiquitous workhorse of every fruit vendor and handyman in the city, idled patiently, its paint chipped and its bumper dented. To any observer, it was invisible, just another piece of the urban landscape, as unremarkable as a pigeon or a discarded plastic bag. But Leah knew its cargo bed was a lie, covered by a reinforced false floor painted to look like rusted, oil-stained metal. Beneath it, nestled in a gyroscopically stabilized, remotely operated cradle, was the instrument. It wasn't a rifle. That was too crude a term. It was the Silas system, a surgical tool of assassination designed by engineers who thought in microns and milliseconds, a weapon born in the sterile clean rooms of Rafael Advanced Defense Systems. Hammer, do you have tone? Leah subvocalized, her eyes locked on Kaviani's gray Mercedes, its polished German engineering an arrogant statement of importance amidst the sea of humble, locally manufactured vehicles. The bone conduction earpiece vibrated again, this time with Gavriel's voice, codenamed Hammer. He was 2 kilometers away, perched in a squalid 4th-floor apartment overlooking a farm of rusted satellite dishes, his entire reality condensed to the glowing pixels of a ruggedized Panasonic ToughPad. The tablet was his scope, his trigger, his entire world. Tone is solid, Saber One. The artist is ready to paint. The connection was a whisper-thin data link, a series of encrypted bursts piggybacking on a compromised municipal Wi-Fi network they had owned for a month, a digital back alley they had paved themselves. 3. The context of this moment, the moral justification for the act of urban murder they were about to commit, had been delivered to them in that same windowless room where Aitan now sat. The air in the briefing room had been thick with the hum of servers and the smell of stale coffee. Aitan, a man whose face was a roadmap of sleepless nights and impossible choices, had stood before a massive screen displaying a rotating 3D model of a P2 gas centrifuge. "This is a facility near Parchin," he had said, his voice quiet but carrying the weight of prophecy. And this is Kaviani's work. He's not refining uranium for power plants. He's building the core. Our projections, the ones from the asset inside his program, an asset we will lose if we don't act, give him 2 months, 60 days, maybe less, until he delivers a viable, mountable warhead design. We do not have 60 days. The politicians have failed. The diplomats have failed. We are the last resort. You are the last resort. He'd then shown them the file on Kaviani, a man of routine, arrogant, brilliant, and fatally careless. He drove the same route from his opulent villa in the wealthy northern suburbs to the secretive facility every morning. He stopped at the same bakery for a sweet roll. He visited his mistress, a university student half his age, on Tuesdays and Thursdays. And he always passed through the intersection of Hemet and Kargar between 7:40 and 7:45 a.m. His predictability, the very intellectual rigidity that made him an efficient scientist, would be his undoing. 2. Rook status? Leah breathed, the word barely a thought. Yosef, the driver of the Zamyad pickup, was codenamed Rook. His voice was a steady, low rumble, a rock in the swirling currents of the operation. He was a man of few words and immovable calm. Position is optimal. Angle is clear. We are ghosts. Spectre, the light, Leah commanded. This was the linchpin of the entire operation. Maya, their net runner, codenamed Spectre, was the true ghost. From a hotel room overlooking the Bosphorus in Istanbul, a location chosen for its robust internet infrastructure and proximity, she had spent the last month burrowing into Tehran's municipal traffic control network. It was a system so antiquated, a patchwork of Siemens S7 controllers from the 90s and shoddy local code, that it was riddled with backdoors and unpatched vulnerabilities. It was practically an open invitation. She wasn't just watching. She was a god in their machine, a digital puppeteer pulling the strings of the city's infrastructure. The light is mine. Maya's voice came through, sharp and clear as shattered glass. He won't get a green until I say so. The countdown timer hit 1. Then, instead of flipping to green, it flickered, died for a microsecond, and reset back to a glaring red 99. A driver behind Kaviani's Mercedes honked, an impatient, angry bleat that echoed down the street. Kaviani, visible now in his driver's side window, gestured with irritation, his hand slicing the air. He had no idea that this minor inconvenience, this electronic glitch in his morning commute, was a carefully crafted curtain rising on the final act of his life. The stage is set. Aitan's voice vibrated in her skull. The final benediction. Hammer, you are cleared to engage. Send our regards to the professor. The mission hadn't started with a briefing. It had started with the terrifyingly delicate process of insertion. 4 individuals, all carrying flawless Canadian passports with meticulously crafted backstories, had filtered into Iran through different routes. Leah had come in as a textile importer through Imam Khomeini Airport. Her Farsi honed to a perfect Tehrani accent, her luggage filled with silk samples and a false bottom containing encrypted comms gear and a sterile laptop. She remembered the customs officer's hard, suspicious eyes, lingering on her for a moment too long, the sweat that trickled down her spine despite the terminal's air conditioning, and the profound, silent relief when he finally stamped her passport with a thud. Gavriel, the shooter, had crossed the mountainous border from Turkey with a trekking group, a quiet, intense man who seemed more interested in birdwatching than geopolitics. His disassembled Silas system packed into the hollow carbon fiber frames of a high-end backpack. Yosef had driven a commercial truck from Azerbaijan, his declared cargo of pomegranates hiding the stripped-down chassis and components of the modified Zamyad pickup, a 20-hour drive fueled by caffeine pills and the constant, low-grade fear of a random inspection. Each entry was a universe of risk, a tightrope walk over a chasm of discovery and a slow, painful death in Evan prison. They had converged on a safe house in the southern suburbs, a dusty place procured by a Sayanim, a local Jewish diaspora volunteer who knew only that he was helping his people, and whose memory of their faces would be deliberately erased at the moment they left. The house smelled of dust, rosewater, and old secrets. For the first 48 hours, they did nothing but acclimate, listening to the rhythm of the city. The haunting call to prayer 5 times a day, the constant rumble of traffic, the shouts of street vendors. They became part of the city's pulse before they dared to act. Then, the surveillance began. A painstaking, soul-crushingly boring art form. They established 3 observation posts. The first was Gavriel's apartment. The second was a shared office space Leah rented under her cover, giving her a view of the entrance to Kaviani's research facility, disguised as a state-owned pharmaceutical company. The third was mobile. Yosef, in a variety of delivery vans and battered cars, providing the crucial connective tissue, tracking the Mercedes between the fixed points. They never looked directly at the target. They watched his reflection in shop windows. They used long-range cameras with polarizing filters to peer through his windshield from a kilometer away. Maya, their digital wraith, was their most powerful eye. She had compromised the GPS in his car, piggybacking on a routine over-the-air software update from the manufacturer in Stuttgart. She could see his every turn, his every stop. She had placed a zero-day exploit on his phone by spoofing a text from his daughter's university, giving her access to his microphone and camera. They heard his arguments with his wife about money, his whispered promises to his mistress, his tuneless humming along to Vivaldi as he drove to build a weapon of mass destruction. They knew him more intimately than his own family, and they were going to kill him. The greatest challenge was the weapon. A sniper on a rooftop was too conventional, the escape route non-existent in a city that would lock down in minutes. A car bomb was too indiscriminate, the potential for civilian casualties strategically and morally unacceptable. Eitan's solution was audacious, born of the Mossad's unique blend of technological fetishism and brutal pragmatism. The Silas system. Gavriel had assembled it in the safe house's garage, his hands moving with the reverence of a watchmaker. The base was a gyroscopic stabilizer, cannibalized from a commercial aerial photography drone. The weapon itself was not a single gun, but an electronically fired bank of 4 smoothbore barrels. It was designed to fire a specific projectile, a 7.62 millimeter tungsten core fléchette, encased in a disintegrating polymer sabot. It had no gunpowder. The projectile was propelled by a compressed nitrogen gas system, making it nearly silent, just a series of sharp, pneumatic hisses. Thump, 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 thump. It was an assassin's scalpel, not a soldier's hammer. The most brilliant and terrifying component was the AI-assisted targeting system. It was linked to a suite of sensors on the truck, a laser rangefinder, a thermal imager, and a high-speed camera. Maya had fed the system thousands of images of Kaviani and his car, teaching the neural network to recognize its target with 99.997% certainty. The system would lock onto the target's head through the driver's side window, calculate for wind, angle, and the ballistic properties of the tempered glass, and place all 4 rounds into a space the size of a playing card in under 1/10 of a second. Gavriel's job was not to aim. It was to give permission. He was the final moral and ethical failsafe in a chain of cold, hard logic. Now, in the manufactured stillness of the endless red light, that chain was reaching its conclusion. Target is stationary. Gabrielle's voice was unnaturally calm, the voice of a surgeon before the first incision. System is acquiring. I have the lock. On his screen, a green box had snapped into place around Kaviani's head. The scientist was looking at his phone, a flicker of annoyance on his face at the traffic delay. He was scrolling through an email, completely oblivious that his entire existence had been reduced to a set of coordinates within that digital frame. The world had shrunk to that green box. Inside, it was a man, a father, a husband, a monster. Outside, it was everything else. Leah, confirm. Aitan's voice was the barest whisper of sound, a final check. Leah's eyes were fixed on the Mercedes. She saw the man, not the target. She saw the slight paunch under his expensive Italian suit, the way he tapped an impatient finger on his phone screen. She thought of the intelligence file, the photo of him beaming with pride at his daughter's university graduation. For a fraction of a second, the crushing, existential weight of what they were about to do threatened to buckle her. This was not a war zone. This was a Tuesday morning. They were the aggressors, the predators in the urban jungle. But then she pictured the other image from the briefing, a satellite photo of Tel Aviv with a red circle superimposed over it, a blast radius projection showing the beach where she took her own daughter for walks. The weight shifted from doubt to cold resolve. She was a surgeon, excising a cancer before it could metastasize. Confirm, she subvocalized. The word tasted like ash and iron. Hammer, you are weapons-free, Eitan commanded. In his dusty apartment, Gavriel's thumb hovered over a red icon on his tablet that simply read, Engage. He took a slow breath, held it, and tapped the screen. 2 kilometers away, inside the hidden compartment of the Zamyad pickup, a circuit closed. The compressed nitrogen gas, held at 3,000 pounds per square inch, was released into the firing chambers by 4 silent magnetic valves. There was no explosion, no gunshot. Just 4 distinct, sharp hisses, like a hydraulic door closing. Thump, 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 thump. The sound was completely swallowed by the ambient noise of the city. The rumble of a passing bus, the distant wail of a siren, the cacophony of car horns. From Leah's perspective, the effect was surreal and horrifyingly clinical. For a single, eternal heartbeat, nothing happened. Then, a small dark circle, like a magic trick, appeared on Kaviani's window. From this single point of impact, a spider web of cracks instantly radiated outwards, the safety glass trying and failing to hold itself together. Before the glass could even begin to fall, Kaviani's head snapped violently to the side, as if pulled by an invisible string. A fine, pink mist erupted on the inside of the passenger window, momentarily painting it crimson before it beaded and ran in sickening streaks. His body slumped, first against the door, then falling sideways into the passenger seat, out of view. The phone clattered onto the floor mats. The entire event, from Gavriel's tap to Kaviani's disappearance, had taken less than a second. A driver in the next lane, a young woman in a bright blue headscarf, glanced over, her face a mask of confusion. She had heard nothing, but she saw the shattered window. She probably assumed a rock had been kicked up from the road. The light that Maya held captive suddenly, miraculously, turned green. Execution complete. Rook, egress now. Leah's voice was flat, a carved piece of ice. Standard dispersal pattern. Maintain radio silence until the echo point. Yosef didn't peel out. He didn't draw attention. He gently eased his foot onto the accelerator, and the Zamyad pickup truck, the murder weapon, pulled smoothly into the intersection, turned right, and vanished into the churning river of Tehran traffic. Leah waited 3 more seconds, a lifetime, then followed, turning left, heading in the opposite direction, her heart now a cold, heavy stone in her chest. Chaos was a slow-blooming, ugly flower. It took nearly 10 seconds for the first real reaction. The driver behind the now stationary Mercedes laid on his horn, a long, furious blast. Others joined in, a chorus of angry metal. A traffic cop on the corner, who had been lazily watching the flow, started to walk towards the gray car, his expression one of annoyance, not alarm. Leah didn't look back. Looking back was a fatal mistake. Her job now was exfiltration. The 3 of them on the ground, Leah, Yosef, and Gavriel, were now the most wanted individuals in the Islamic Republic of Iran. They just didn't know it yet. Yosef drove for 12 blocks, a journey that felt like a lifetime. Every car that lingered behind them, every police officer on a corner, was a potential executioner. He pulled into the dim, echoing underground parking garage of a shopping mall, a pre-scouted location. He parked the Zamyad in a designated spot, got out, and walked away without a backward glance. The truck, with its sophisticated weapons still nestled in the back, was now a dead end for any investigators. It had been purchased for cash from a used car lot by a man with a fake identity who had ceased to exist the moment he drove it off the lot. The license plates were forgeries of a real car that was, at that very moment, parked in a different city hundreds of kilometers away. He walked up to the mall's food court, bought a bottle of water, and sat down. 10 minutes later, a man in a janitor's uniform pushed a cart past his table and carelessly dropped a set of keys. Yosef waited a full minute, then bent down, picked them up, and walked back to the garage, to a different level, where a nondescript silver Hyundai Sonata was waiting. His part of the escape was underway. Gavriel, the hammer, was already a ghost. The moment he'd confirmed the hit, he had wiped the tablet with a military-grade eraser program, then physically smashed its screen and motherboard. He'd placed the fragments in a backpack, walked out of the apartment, and blended into the morning crowds heading for the metro. He was just another face, another body in the press of humanity. His destination was a bus station, where he would board a long-haul coach to the city of Mossad, near the Afghan border. Leah's route was the most complex. She was the team leader, the Saber. She drove to a wealthy northern suburb, to a public park filled with rose gardens and fountains. She parked the Peugeot, leaving the keys under the floor mat. The car was a rental, paid for with a stolen credit card number. It would be reported missing in a day or two, another dead end. She walked into the park's public restroom, the air thick with the smell of bleach and damp concrete, entering a stall. 5 minutes later, she emerged a different person. The conservative housewife's attire was gone, stuffed into a disposal bag and hidden in the cistern. She was now dressed in the jeans, t-shirt, and sneakers of a university student. The chador was replaced by a baseball cap, her dark hair tied back in a ponytail. She carried a different purse, wore different shoes. She exited the park on the opposite side and hailed a taxi. An hour later, the first news reports began to filter out. A prominent scientist, Dr. Arash Kaviani, had died. The initial reports were confused. Some said a sudden, massive heart attack. Others mentioned a stroke. The state-run media was being cautious. But the teams on the ground in Tehran, the men from the Ministry of Intelligence and the Revolutionary Guard, were not confused. They knew a shattered car window and a catastrophic head wound were not a heart attack. They knew the signature of the work. The city's lockdown would begin soon. The airports would become traps. The border crossings would become impenetrable walls of scrutiny. Leah, Yosef and Gavriel were in a race against the closing of that net. Leah's taxi dropped her at the university. She walked onto the campus, blending in with thousands of other students. She entered the main library, found a quiet carrel, and opened a textbook on Farsi poetry. For the next 3 hours, she sat there, turning pages, appearing to study. She was waiting for the echo, their first prearranged communication window post-operation. At exactly 2 p.m. Tehran time, her burner phone, a simple, featureless device, vibrated once in her pocket. A single text message. It was a string of numbers, a coded confirmation from Aitan that the first phase of their individual exfiltration plans was clear to proceed. She left the library and began the long walk to her second safe house, a small apartment rented by a shell corporation. The city was different now. The tension was a physical presence, a charge in the air. There were more police cars on the streets, their sirens oddly silent, which was somehow more menacing. She saw IRGC patrols on street corners, their faces grim, their eyes scanning every car, every pedestrian. The net was closing. Yosef was already on the highway, heading east in the Hyundai. His goal was the same as Gavriel's. Mossad. They would travel separately, stay in different hostels, and only link up at the final extraction point. It was basic tradecraft. If one was caught, they could not betray the location of the others. The next 48 hours were a masterclass in controlled terror. Leah remained holed up in her apartment, watching the news. The official story had changed. Dr. Kaviani had been the victim of a cowardly terrorist assassination by agents of the Zionist regime. His funeral was a massive state-sponsored event, with hundreds of thousands chanting, "Death to Israel" and "Death to America." His face was on giant banners hanging from buildings. He was a martyr now. The hunt for his killers was a national crusade. The news showed grainy CCTV footage of the Zamyad pickup, asking the public for any information. They showed a composite sketch of the man who bought the truck, a face that belonged to no one. On the third day, Leah left. Her new identity was that of a French art historian in Iran to study Islamic calligraphy. Her passport was a work of art, her backstory impeccable. She took a flight from Tehran's domestic airport to Shiraz, a city in the south, deliberately moving away from the eastern borders where the authorities would be concentrating their search. From Shiraz, she hired a private car and driver, an old man who smelled of tobacco and was happy for the generous cash payment, to take her on a sightseeing tour of the ancient ruins of Persepolis. But they never got to Persepolis. Halfway there, on a lonely stretch of desert highway, she feigned a sudden illness. The old driver, concerned, pulled over. It was then that a second car, which had been discreetly following them for an hour, pulled up behind. 2 men got out. They weren't Iranian. They were Katsas from the Caesarea unit, the Mossad Special Operations Division, the extraction team. They paid the old driver a sum of money that would ensure his silence and his confusion, and Leah got into their car. They drove south, towards the coast of the Persian Gulf. Meanwhile, Gavriel and Yosef had arrived separately in Mashhad. They didn't contact each other. They waited. Their extraction was cruder, far more dangerous. Under the cover of darkness, they were led by a Baluchi smuggler, a man whose loyalties lay with money, not flags, across the porous, lawless border into Afghanistan. They walked for 9 hours through rocky, treacherous terrain, the threat of Iranian border patrols on one side and Taliban fighters on the other, a constant, pressing danger. They were finally met on the other side by a black, unmarked MH-6 Little Bird helicopter, which lifted them out of the dust and into the safety of the night sky. Leah's journey ended on a deserted beach. The salty air a balm on her raw nerves. A small, fast Zodiac boat appeared out of the darkness of the Gulf, its engines a low whisper. It carried her out to international waters, where a nondescript freighter was waiting, its lights dimmed. The moment she stepped onto the steel deck of the ship, she felt the tension of the past 2 months begin to drain from her body, leaving behind an exhaustion so profound it was a physical pain. The mission was over. They were out. They were safe. Back in Tel Aviv, in the quiet, air-conditioned room, Eitan watched the 3 green dots on his global map converge on friendly territory. Saber, Hammer, Rook, all home. He took off his glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose, feeling the grit of sleeplessness in his eyes. There was no celebration. There was no joy. Just the quiet, hollow satisfaction of a problem solved, a threat neutralized. He looked at the screen one last time. The file photo of Arash Kaviani, smiling, confident. A man who had woken up 3 days ago to have breakfast with his family and was now a martyr buried in the soil of his homeland. Eitan opened a drawer and pulled out a bottle of single malt whiskey and a single glass. He poured 2 fingers and took a sip. The burn was familiar, grounding. His secure phone buzzed, a low, insistent hum. It was the Prime Minister's office. He answered. "Is it done?" the voice on the other end asked, without preamble. "It is done," Eitan replied, his own voice a monotone. "Was it clean?" "As clean as such things can be. No collateral damage. Our people are out." There was a pause, a moment of static that seemed to stretch across an eternity. "And the program?" "We've bought ourselves time," Eitan said, staring out at the secure video feed of the Mediterranean, a placid blue that belied the turmoil beneath. "We cut off the head of the snake, but the snake has other heads. This has set their weaponization schedule back by at least 2 years, maybe 3. They have his research, but Kaviani was the key, the only one who could put it all together. They'll have to start again with a new team, a new genius." "Good. Good work, Eitan." The line went dead. Time. They had bought time. That was what they did. They didn't win wars. They postponed them. They traded lives for time. It was a brutal, ugly calculus, but it was the only one they had. He finished his whiskey and stood up, the chair scraping softly on the polished floor. He walked over to a secure filing cabinet, spun the combination lock, and pulled out a thick, beige folder. The name on the tab was not Iranian. It was Syrian. The file contained crisp satellite photos of a clandestine laboratory near Aleppo, intelligence reports on the production of a new, more potent variant of sarin gas, and the profile of a brilliant chemical engineer. A man of routine. A man who drove the same car to work every day. A man who passed through the same intersection at precisely the same time. Eitan placed the file on his desk, the first page open under the cool, white light of the lamp. A new target. A new city. A new game. The board was reset. The pieces were waiting. The work was never done.